Morning, church. Good to be here again. So I'm going to tell you about one of my favorite movies as a kid, The Great Escape. I loved it. Every time it was on TV, get up, watch it. Make sure every single time. And if you haven't seen it, it's the story of a bunch of Allied POWs during World War II. They're in a German prison camp, and they concoct this escape. Not just to get a few people out, but to get like 250 people out of the prison that they're in. And so most of the movie, it follows them around. They got their secret plan to dig a tunnel from the barracks out beyond the tree line so they can get out that way. And then once they do that, they're caught, and about 70 people are able to get out of the barracks. But the movie doesn't end there, because the thing is that all those people who got out, they're still in the middle of Germany. They're trapped behind enemy lines. And the rest of the movie is following different people as they try to find their way back to Allied territory. And, we got the classic one, Steve McQueen riding his motorcycle away from German troops, jumping over barbed wire fences, finally crashing in, just reaching out. It's so close as the German soldiers get in. And I was thinking about this, and it made me realize that that's actually kind of similar to our journey with Christ. Because we start off, we're a prisoner of sin. We're a prisoner of death. And then Jesus comes along and he frees us. And it's great and it's wonderful and everything is going to be perfect, right? No. Because we're still behind enemy lines. We still have people around us that cause us heartache. We still have people around us who are against the message of Jesus. And we have to navigate, even though we're free from sin, even though we're free from the penalty of death, we have to navigate our way until finally we join him in eternity. Jesus flat out says this. I guess that slide got done. Oh, well. I'll read it. John 15, 18 and 19. If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it, but you are no longer part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, and so it hates you. And I'm guessing you don't have to think too hard to picture some of the people who are the enemies around you, who make your life difficult. So there's the boss. There we go. Who takes credit for your successes, blames you for their failures, blames you for their failures. There's that family member who betrayed you. There's that company who keeps giving you a runaround. They won't treat you fairly. Maybe it's that other political party. They're destroying everything that's good about this country. And I'll be honest, with the election in a month and with all the craziness going on, this is the one I hear people talk about the most. And to be clear, with politics, I'm not picking sides. Each side points to the other saying, they're the ones causing all the problems. We're trying to fix things. Goes both ways. So we're surrounded by enemies. And we got to figure out how to deal with them. And the thing is, Jesus is very clear how he wants us to deal with them. Is it stuck on maybe clear? There we go. Thank you, Allie. I love you so much. Okay. You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask. Don't turn away from those who want to borrow. You've heard the law that says love your neighbor and hate your enemies, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And we know this. But the thing is, it is hard. Last week when Brother Thomas was sharing, he started getting into this, and one thing he said was, one way God tests our resolve is by saying, go pray for someone you don't like. But I don't wanna. You don't know what they've did. You don't know what they stand for. You don't know the type of person. I don't want to. But we don't get to make the call because Jesus made the command. We're called to listen. So today, I wanted to look at some of the obstacles. Like, what are the things that keep us from loving our enemy? First one I'd take a look at, fear. What are ways that fear manifests? What's going to happen to me if they get their way? What will they do if nobody stops them? If I'm not mean to them, people will think I actually approve of what's going on. I can't show them love, dignity, respect because the stakes are too high. And I want to be clear here. When Jesus says love, it's agape love. It is an action. It means dignity, respect, treating them fairly, whether they deserve it or not. This isn't about like feeling warm fuzzies or saying, well, I like them. No, it's about treating them with the respect that they deserve. So let's look at a story from the Bible about Elisha. And the background for this is that Israel is having a border skirmish with the nation of Aram, and the king of Aram keeps trying to attack, and God reveals to Elijah where the attacks are going to come from, and so Israel's able to defend itself. King of Aram, he's like ticked off, and so he finds out about Elijah, and so he sends his troops to go kill Elisha. And this is where we'll pick up, when the troops get there and are surrounding Elisha's home. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh no, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet, that's Elisha, by the way, the prophet, answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." And the Lord opens the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. God's there. God has their back, even though the servant doesn't know it. As the enemy came down towards him, Elijah prayed to the Lord, "Strike the enemy with blindness." So he struck them with blindness, as Elijah had asked. But Elijah told him, "This isn't the road. This is not the city. Follow me. I will lead you to the man you're looking for." And he led them to Samaria. Incidentally, at this point in history, Samaria is the capital of Israel. As they entered the city, Elijah said, "Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see." Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were, inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elijah, "Shall I kill him? Shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them?" And Elijah answered, "Would you kill those who have been captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink and go back to their master." So he prepared a great feast for them, and after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away. And they returned to their master. So the bands from Aaron stopped raiding the territories. So start off, the servant, he's like, "Oh no, they're here to kill us." And Elijah's like, no, God's got this. He's there. He brings them over to the king of Aram, and the king of Aram's like, "Oh my gosh, this is a golden opportunity. We got to kill them. That'll show the Arameans." And Elijah says, "No. We need to treat them with dignity and respect. Feed them, send them home. Showing them love." Because Elisha knew God's got this. God is in control. And a lot of times, just showing that grace, saying, "You know what, I'm not going to treat them the way they deserve, but I'm going to show grace," ends up diffusing a situation. And if I were to stop right here, you'd get that impression from this story too. The bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. Except the next verse. Sometime later, however, King Ben-Hadad of Aram mustered his entire army and besieged Samaria. They went straight past the border towns, straight for the capital, put it under siege. As a result, there was a great famine in the city, and the siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 pieces of silver, and a cup of dove's dung sold for 5 pieces of silver. For context, Before this, you could probably buy like an entire lamb for 5 pieces of silver, and now it's a cup of dove's dung. Things got worse, a lot worse. And later on, like it talks about some women who were so desperate that they end up sacrificing their own children and eating them so that they wouldn't die. This is bad situation. And so who's to blame? Well, the king has an idea. The king of Israel says, "May God strike me and even kill me if I don't separate Elisha's head from his shoulders this very day," the king vowed. That guy Elijah encouraged me to show grace and love to these guys, and look what happened. Everything fell apart. If I hadn't listened to Elijah, we wouldn't be in this mess. But man, and again, king doesn't stop there. The king said, all this misery is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? Because that's what Elijah was saying. Trust in the Lord. Okay, I'm trusting the Lord. Elijah, you let me down. Look at all the bad stuff. That must mean God let me down. So he sends soldiers to go kill Elisha. But once again, the story doesn't end there. There were 4 men with leprosy sitting at the entrance of the city gates. Why should we sit here and die? They asked each other. We'll starve if we stay here. With the famine in the city, we'll starve if we go back. We may as well go out and surrender to the Aramean army. If they let us live, so much the better. But if they kill us, we would have died anyway. So at twilight, they set out for the camp of the Arameans. But when they came to the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Aramean army to hear the clatter of speeding chariots, the galloping of horses, the sound of a great army approaching. The king of Israel has hired the Hittites and Egyptians to attack us, they cried to one another. So they panicked and ran into the night, abandoning their tents, horses, and donkeys, and everything else as they fled for their lives. God, single-handedly, overnight, without intervention from anyone, fixed it all like that. And he didn't just fix it, he left the spoils of war just sitting at the gates for the Israelites to just go pick up and bring home. That is the faithfulness of God. And I notice the sound of chariots and horses. Where did we see those before? When God opened up the servant's eyes. God is in control. If you're faced in people, if you're faced in the things that we do, hate to break it to you, it's not going to work. You're going to have to worry about, oh no, what are we going to do? How are we going to stop them? And what will happen if I do or don't? And we don't have room to show love. And this manifests itself in quotes like this that you may have heard. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. It's on you to fix the situation. The only way to deal with that one person is to just sue them. Otherwise, they'll think they can get away with that type of behavior. The only way to deal with that insurance company, just get them on the phone, tear into them, because otherwise, there's no way they'll hold up their end of the bargain. There's no way I'll get my just recompensation. The only way to keep this country from falling apart is to get our people in that office because those other guys will destroy everything. This quote is wrong. Evil can't triumph because God has won the battle. He has been sitting on the throne victorious since time immemorial. We don't have to worry. We don't have to be the ones to fix everything. God's got it. And when we start turning our attention to people and trusting them to fix things, trusting ourselves to fix things, that's when we get into trouble. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, God establishes the kingdom of Israel. And in the process, he gives them a ton of warnings. And it just basically boils down to this. If your hope is in human institutions, even the ones that God puts in place, you are rejecting God. Those were God's words. You are rejecting God. If your hope is in people, even leaders that God puts in place, you will get burned because they will let you down. However, if you hope in God, it doesn't matter which institutions are in control. It doesn't matter what leaders are out there. It doesn't matter which people are doing what. God will make his kingdom flourish. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like, well, I guess we shouldn't vote or, just let people do whatever you want. No. Get involved. Vote. Be part of the things you believe in. But the thing is, our motivation isn't out of fear of what may happen. Our motivation is, you know what? God has called me to this. And so in obedience, I will follow. And I will do it in a way in accordance with his will, which includes showing love to my enemies. If you act out of obedience to God, trusting he'll take care of the picture, it gives us the freedom to love enemies because I'm no longer focused on, oh no, what are they going to do? Oh no, someone's got to stop it. Instead, I'm focused on God. Where do you want me to go? My focus is here, not there. And so the people over there, I can love because my focus is God. Two other things that get in the way of loving enemies: hurt and anger. And I want to group these two together because it's a cycle. You get hurt, and so you get angry, and you take revenge. And then that person's there now hurt, and they get angry, and and goes back and forth and back and forth. We've all been hurt by someone. So in the Bible, we're going to look at David. He was a man who was hurt by a lot of people. Earlier, I mentioned how God established the kingdom of Israel. And the first king God chose to lead was Saul. And true to God's word, Saul started off, hey, doing a good job. But after time, he let his own pride and ego get in the way, and he started making decisions that made Israel worse, that ended up hurting the people of the community. And so in response, God anointed David and said, you will be the one to take up the mantle once Saul has died. And so now it's in this kind of awkward situation. Saul is still king, but everyone knows that David's next. And Saul doesn't like this. He thinks his line should be king. And he starts believing conspiracy theories about David, thinking David's out to get him. Sometime later, Israel's at war with the Philistines. Several of Saul's sons end up dying. Saul loses heart and commits suicide. Now it's David's turn to step up to the throne. And the officials gather together and crown David as king. In the official ceremony, with all the official people, and everything's great. Except for there's this one guy, Ishbosheth. He's one of David's sons, or Saul's sons who didn't die. People start looking at him and going, wait a minute, he should be king. David is an illegitimate king. David should be king. And they start banding about him. And a group of Ishbosheth's supporters start a big old fight. There's a battle, like 400 people die before finally this guy, Abner, who's one of Ishbosheth's advisors, is like, okay, this is enough. We got to back off. They go their separate ways. And Ishbosheth, a little while later, confronts Abner and starts accusing him of being a traitor. But Abner keeps responding. He has always been loyal to Saul, and he straight up tells Ishbosheth that whether he likes it or not, David is a legitimate king, and it's time to set aside this foolish rebellion and make peace with David. And Ishbosheth relents. Now the transfer of power is complete. David has secured the kingdom, except just because David and Ishbosheth have resolved their differences doesn't mean everything's over. So two of David's guys, some of his top soldiers, Joab and Abner, they go and find, Joab and Abishai. They go out and find Abner, and they kill him. First, for the pain and trouble that he's caused David, and second, because Abner actually, in that big battle, Abner killed their brother, so they're taking revenge for that. And then on Ishbosheth's side, there are a couple of guys, Bana and Rechab. There were a couple of guys, up to no good, started making trouble in the neighborhood. Fought by Ishbosheth's side, but they both got scared and said, we need to make a plan to distance us from Saul's heir. And that's what they did. They snuck into his house at night, stabbed him in the gut, chopped off his head, and brought it to King David and saying, hey, David, we took out your political rival. We assassinated him for you. Aren't you happy? Now, before I go on, I got to pause right here. As I was studying this and going through it, I couldn't help but notice a lot of parallels to current American politics. Maybe you did as well. And it's not like it's a one-to-one correspondence. Don't read too deep into similarities. But there's a lot that I was like, wow. And it made me realize that I don't know about you, but sometimes I look around at what's going on in the country and I go, oh my gosh, there's just unprecedented stuff happening here. But this made me come back and take a look and say, you know what? From God's perspective, he dealt with garbage like this 3,000 years ago, and it was no problem for him then. It's going to be no problem for him now. We don't have to worry about all the junk. We don't have to fear. God's in control. Back to David. So, during this period, he has all these enemies, people trying to get at him. We have Saul, we have Abner, we have Ishbosheth, and a whole bunch of other guys. And the question is, how does David feel about all these enemies? I mean, he's a man after God's own heart. So he just loves them, and he's happy with them. It's like, yay, gang. No, he's not. Go read Psalms. He talks about his enemies, and he has stuff to say. Come, redeem me from my enemies. Free me from them. You know of my shame, scorn, and disgrace. You see what my enemies are doing. Their insults have broken my heart. I'm in despair. If only one person would show some pity. If only one would turn and comfort me. But instead, they give me poison for food. They offer me sour wine for my thirst. Let the bountiful table set before them become a snare, and their prosperity become a trap. Let their eyes go blind so they cannot see. Make their bodies shake continually. Pour out your fury on them. Consume them with your burning anger. Let their homes become desolate, their tents be deserted. To you, to the one you have punished, they add insult to injury. They add to the pain of those hurt. Pile up their sins high. Don't let them go free. Erase their names from the book of life. Don't let them be counted among the righteous. Wow. That is intense. There is pain. There is anger there that David wrestles with. And you know what? There are tons of passages like this that he wrote. This isn't an isolated thing. And in some of them, he even kind of starts like putting a righteous twist on them. For example, Psalm 139. Oh God, if you would destroy the wicked, get out of my life, your murderers. They blaspheme you. See, now they're not his enemies, they're God's enemies now. They blaspheme you. Your enemies misuse your name. Oh Lord, shouldn't I hate those who hate you? Shouldn't I despise those who despise you? Yes, I hate them with total hatred, for your enemies are my enemies. He's righteous now, because it is with God's enemies that he is angry. That makes it okay. Deuteronomy 35. And this is God speaking. God says, I will take revenge. I will pay them back. In due time, their feet will slip. Their day of disaster will arrive, and their destiny will overtake them. God says he's got it. We don't need to be consumed by that hatred and that anger and that pain because God is in control. God will take care of it. So we can take our pain, we can take that anger and leave it at his feet. And it gives us the freedom to love our enemies. And David recognizes this. Because right after he says, yes, I hate them with total hatred, for your enemies are my enemies, he goes on to say this. Search me, O God. Know my heart. Know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you. Lead me along the path of everlasting life. He takes his pain and his anger, brings it to God, sets it at his feet, and he's brutally honest with God. Like, I earnestly believe that's why those Psalms are there, to let us know that it's okay to be honest with God. This is what I am really feeling. God appreciates our honesty more than pleasantries. And yes, pain and anger, they feel like these negative things. They're like, oh no, should I be feeling? Hey, they are emotions God gave us to let us know that something's wrong. And his instructions are, when you realize something is wrong, bring it to me and ask me what to do. And that's what David does. He brings it to God. So let's take a look back at these individuals who caused David so much pain and heartache. So Saul, when he committed suicide, there was a guy who found him. And either Saul wasn't quite dead and the guy killed him, or the guy lied about doing that just to get on David's good side. Either way, he went to David saying, hey, I killed Saul, thinking that he would be on David's good side because of all of this hatred and anger that David has. His response, David's response, why were you not afraid to kill the Lord's anointed one? David asked. Then David said to one of his men, kill him. So the man thrust his sword into the Amalekite and killed him. You have condemned yourself, David said, for you yourself confessed that you killed the Lord's anointed one. He had the guy executed in accordance with the law because he killed an innocent man. And then after this, David writes a poem to Saul and Jonathan, honoring them. That guy Abner, that's David's buddies, Joab and Abishai, went and killed. And remember, Abner killed Joab's brother, and so from a legal standpoint, Joab is justified. He can't be executed for this. But David still doesn't approve. David said to his officials, don't you realize that a great commander has fallen today in Israel? And even though I'm the anointed king, these two sons of Zerah, Joab and Abishai, are too strong for me to control. May the Lord repay these evil men for their evil deeds. He honors Abner. He shows him respect to his officials, and he condemns Joab and Abishai for their actions. You shouldn't have done that. Why did you live in your anger? Why did you live in your pain instead of living through God? And then those two assassins who brought Ishbosheth's head. David says, someone once told me Saul is dead, thinking he was bringing good news. But I seized him and killed him at Ziklag. That's the reward I gave him for his news. How much more should I reward evil men who have killed an innocent man in his own house, in his own bed? Shouldn't I hold you responsible for his blood and rid the earth of you? And he has them executed again for murdering an innocent man in accordance with the law. Rather than reaching out and taking joy in the pleasure of these deaths, he fought for justice for them even after they had died. That is showing respect. That is showing honor. That is showing integrity. That is showing love. How do you deal with your pain? How do you deal with your anger? Do you lash out? Do you bottle it up and just think really, really bad thoughts? Do you gossip about it to your friends? Do you post about it on social media just going like, ah? Or do you take it to God and say, God, this is what I am feeling. This is the pain and the hurt inside me. I give it to you. Do you choose to ask him for guidance? Because when you come to him, he wants to release it from you so that you can be free from it, so that it won't consume you anymore. And once that has happened, it frees us to show love to our enemies. Another thing that holds us back, pride. This is going to be the last one that we look at today in terms of emotions, but there's more out there. I just want to say that up front. Because we can't cover everything, right? So for this, we're actually going to look later on in David's life when David started letting Israel down. Remember how he said, God said, every human leader is going to let you down. Saul let the people down. David replaced him. David let the people down right here too. And what happened, he totally lost control of his kids. Like they got away with murder. I mean, they literally got away with murder and incestuous rape and just gross stuff. And more than that, they manipulated David into allowing the circumstances. David let the people down big time. And David's son, Absalom, saw an opportunity. He went traveling around the countryside saying, hey, King David let me down. If he has let you down too, come follow me. And then he'd come over here and say, hey, King David's let me down. If he has let you down, come follow me. And then he went and he had an army behind him when he got to Jerusalem because so many people knew David was letting the country down. And they kicked David out. And he and a bunch of his soldiers are fleeing. They got to skip town because David's son is just too much. And as they're fleeing for their lives, they have an encounter with a guy named Shimei. As David came to Barum, a man came out of the village cursing them. It was Shimei, son of Gera, from the same clan as Saul's family. He threw stones at the king and the king's officers and all the mighty warriors who surrounded him. Get out of here, you murderer, you scoundrel, he shouted at David. The Lord is paying you back for all the bloodshed you caused to Saul's clan. You stole his throne, and now the Lord has given it to your son Absalom. At last you have a taste of your own medicine, for you are a murderer. Now, first off, I want to point off right here. Shimei's accusations, about stealing the throne. No, God gave him the throne. His accusations about the bloodshed in Saul's clan. No, it was these other guys who killed Saul and Ishbosheth and those guys. David fought for justice for them. The stuff that Shimei is saying is wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. Absolutely wrong. And he's just pouring it all. David, this is all your fault. And so one of David's soldiers, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Abishai, son of Zeruiah, demanded. Let me go over and cut off his head. Let's kill him. Why? Why? Shimei's a little punk. He's a nobody. We're the big dogs around here. Doesn't he know who's boss? David is the king, and here's nobody threatening him. And what's more, this guy Shimei, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Do you realize that David fought for the people of Saul? Oh. There's no way a punk like this should be messing with us. What's motivating him? It's pride. It's pride, so much more. And it adds insult to injury that here they are fleeing for their lives as well. That hurts the ego, and so he's got to grasp back at it. But what was David's response? No, the king said. Who asked your opinion, son of Zeruiah? You ever get involved in something that's really not yours, but you have to because of this or that? If the Lord has told him to curse me, who are you to stop him? And I read that and I'm like, wow. Shimei's wrong. He's being a punk. There's no excuse for his actions. That's what I think. Andrew, the human being, But David's like, if the Lord has told him to to curse me, who are you to stop him? This is one of the hardest things to do. To take those personal attacks, the things that damage your ego, that damage yourself, and just say, you know what? It's hard enough saying, you know what, I'm going to let it slide, but it's even harder to say, you know what? Maybe God's doing something through this. Ooh. And I think it's, at this ego place of like, they're wrong and this is right and this is how we do things, that politics really kind of gets to the forefront. I looked into the facts. I've done the research. I understand this situation better than anyone. Any reasonable person who understands the situation would obviously come to the same conclusions. If anyone disagrees with me, they're an idiot who's been brainwashed by the liberal/conservative media, whatever it is. No one would be able to come to that conclusion because I am right about everything. Therefore, they are the enemy. We need to stop them. And again, I hear this from all sorts of people. This isn't the left-right thing. Everybody says it. Heck, even the moderates say it about everyone. Right? I feel like Calvin here a lot. And man, you can ask Allie the number of times I've gone like, man, don't they just know? Wouldn't it be better if? They don't understand, but what if God is working through them? Who am I to stop them? Thing is, politically speaking, both major parties have good stuff about them and bad stuff about them. And both get angry and think that the other one's doing it wrong. And rather than leave it abstract, I'm going to jump into some specifics here, okay? Let's talk about the poor. Here's a verse in the Bible talking about the poor. And there's lots of verses like this, Old and New Testament. You lazy bones, how long will you sleep? When will you wake up? Little extra steep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. The Bible's full of verses warning people like, hey, if you don't do what it takes to take care of yourself and your family, don't be surprised if you're in a tough situation and that responsibility falls on you. You need to shape up. But at the same time, that same God says, whoever gives to the poor will lack nothing. Those who close their eyes to poverty will be cursed. Again, Old and New Testament, time and time again, commanding people, care for the poor. Don't let people starve. It's not either or, it's both and. And these two principles of God are in tension with each other. And one major political party tends to focus on one part of this tension. One political party tends to focus on another part of this tension. How about immigration? This is from Leviticus 19, 33, 34. Don't take the advantage of the foreigner living among your land. Treat them like native-born Israelites. Love them as you love yourself. Remember that you were once foreigners living in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Treat the foreigner in your land with grace, with dignity, respect, just like you would any of your fellow countrymen. But the same God who says this also says the same instructions apply to both the native-born Israelite and the foreigners living among you. Those who brazenly violate the Lord's will, whether native-born Israelites or foreigners, have blasphemed the Lord, and they must be cut off from the community. The people living here must abide by the laws of the land, and if they refuse to do so, there's going to be consequences, perhaps even expulsion from the community. God speaks of both of these things, and one major political party tends to focus on one side of this tension, and another major political party tends to focus on the other side of this tension. How about valuing life? Life is so valuable. If you falter in a time of trouble, how small is your strength? Rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those who are staggering towards slaughter. Life is valuable. It is our duty and our responsibility to go protect life. Don't falter in times of trouble. And some people look around and say, where are people staggering towards death? And they see the unborn, those unable to speak for themselves. And so they try and pursue policies, laws, and regulations to protect the lives of the unborn in an effort to value and preserve life, to protect those staggering towards death. And others look and see that, you know what, the most notable cause of violent death in the United States is gun violence. And we need to pursue policy, and they say we need to pursue policies, laws, regulations around guns, not only to protect the lives in the future, but also to honor those who have died in the past in an effort to preserve and value life, to protect those who are staggering towards death. And just again, one of our major political parties tends to focus on one of these. And our other major political party tends to focus on the other. And I know what you're thinking. Andrew, let's be real. You're acting like all these issues are the same. You're trying to make false equivalents that aren't there. And you know what? Hey, I'm all for that other things, but you know what? The solution that the other guys are offering, they're weak, they're ineffective, they'll end up causing more harm. Hey, I'm not arguing any of that. I'm not arguing what's more important. I'm not arguing what solutions are effective or not. Remember, Shimei was totally wrong, absolutely wrong in everything he said. What I'm asking is, are you willing to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, someone you disagree with is making the choices they make because God has led them down that path? Just maybe. And it's not just politics. I mean, it's at work. It's, here's this project and here's the problem. Now I have the solution and theirs is a piece of garbage. It's at home. Your spouse, they just don't understand. This is how we're supposed to do things, and this is what we agreed to, and they don't get it. Maybe it's the church. It's obvious what this portion of Scripture means and how we're to interpret it and apply it. And anyone who disagrees, I don't know, maybe they just don't trust the Bible like I do. Are we willing to step back and say, you know what, maybe God is leading them down that path? Maybe he's not, but what if he is? And I tell you, there's one way to find out. Have a conversation with them. And I don't mean like, let me tell you why you're wrong. Let me explain to you what's wrong. No, I mean, get them together, sit down, shut up, and say, tell me what you're thinking, and then just listen. And then when they're done, don't have your deluge of retorts ready to go to, well, no. Just say, thank you for explaining that to me. I appreciate it. I'm not going to lie, that's hard. Really hard. And there's the fear behind it that this is going to go bad. Oh, I've dealt with that. But let me tell you, for every time that I have a conversation with someone and they're off the rails and what they're saying isn't justified, there are so many more where I listen to this conversation and I go, wow, I hadn't thought of that thing. I hadn't pictured it that way before. I still disagree, mind you, but I get where you're coming from and I respect that. I respect it. And sometimes I come away from that conversation going, man, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. Maybe I'm the one who's need to change. And that's where David's prayer comes in. Search me, O God, know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out if there's anything in me that offends you. Lead me along the path of everlasting life. We get so focused on what's their problem. Why don't they understand? Why don't they change? But the only person we can control is us. And the only thing that we can do is those situations to say, okay, what do I need to change? And you bring it to God and you set it at his feet and say, God, this is what's going on, and I don't get it, and I feel that things are arrayed against me, and they're wrong. But God, speak to me, because it's not about what I think. It's about what you think. There's a much bigger picture here going on. Because the thing is, God is at work doing something far, far greater than any of us can imagine. Our last passage of Scripture, we're going to look at, in Isaiah. And this is a prophecy against the nations of Egypt and Assyria. And this one's special because there's a lot of prophecies against Egypt in the Bible. There's a lot of prophecies against Assyria in the Bible. But this one is widely regarded as God's final prophecy against them. And you'll see why once we get to it. But before we do that, we need to take a step back. What do Egypt and Assyria represent to Israel? So, probably all heard about Egypt. Israel was slaves under Egypt for a long, long time. And then God, through his power and his power alone, freed them. And they escaped. And they made their way eventually to the promised land. But while they were in Egypt, the king of Pharaoh, he slaughtered their children to show them who's boss. Forced them to work, treated them as slave labor. They were the biggest enemies that Israel faced. And in the time after that, in the 800 years between Egypt and when this prophecy is being foretold, they faced a lot of other enemies like the Arameans we mentioned earlier, the Philistines, the Amalekites, the Amorites, the Jebusites. But none of those guys compared to what Egypt and the threat that they were to Israel. Until Assyria came along. And at this point in time, when this prophecy is being written, Assyria is in power. And it's growing and it's swallowing up nations, the greatest threat that they have seen since Egypt. And the empire is coming around here across the Fertile Crescent and down, conquering more and more. And they are getting to the gates of Jerusalem right there, ready to conquer and destroy the Israelites. Egypt and Assyria, the greatest threats to the safety, security, and well-being of the Israelites. And if you ask people today, what are the equivalents? What are the greatest threats to our safety, security, and well-being? You'll probably hear things like China, Russia, North Korea, Middle East. So when we're talking Egypt and Assyria, whatever you feel that greatest threat is, stick that in, okay? Isaiah chapter 19. In that day, the Egyptians will be as weak as women. They will cower in fear beneath the upraised fist of the Lord of heaven's armies. Just to speak the name of Israel will terrorize them, for the Lord of heaven's armies has laid out his plans against them. Ready for the judgment? In that day, 5 of Egypt's cities will follow the Lord of heaven's armies. They will begin to speak Hebrew, the language of Canaan. One of these cities will be Heliopolis, the city of the sun. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt, and there will be a monument to the Lord at its border. It will be a sign and a witness that the Lord of heaven's armies is worshipped in land of Egypt. When the people of Egypt cry out to the Lord for help against those who oppress them, he, the Lord, will send them a Savior who will rescue them. The Lord will make himself known to the Egyptians. Yes, they will know the Lord and will give him sacrifices and offerings to him. They will make a vow to the Lord and keep it. The Lord will strike Egypt, and then he will bring healing, for the Egyptians will turn to the Lord, and he will listen to their pleas and heal them. These are the same promises that God gave Israel so many times, and now he's giving them to Egypt. In that day, Egypt and Assyria will be connected by a highway. The Egyptians and the Assyrians will move freely between their lands, and they will both worship God. In that day, Israel will be third, along with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth. For the Lord of heaven's armies will say, "Blessed be Egypt, my people. Blessed be Assyria, the land I have made. Blessed be Israel, my special possession." God's final ultimate prophecy against the enemies of Egypt and Assyria is that they will stand side by side with Israel as brothers, worshiping the Lord. Egypt, my people. Assyria, the land I have made. Israel, my special possession. I'd like to invite the worship team up at this point. If this is God's plan for Israel's worst enemies that they have ever faced, what is God's plan for your worst enemy? The truth is, every single enemy that you have ever faced, every jerk that you have encountered, every person who has betrayed you, everyone who has stabbed you in the back, every company or organization that just feels like they're ruining everything, each and every person, each and every one of those people is an eternal, immortal being created in the image of God for the express purpose of honoring and worshiping Him. And you know what? They are all trapped behind enemy lines. They have been told that they need to guard themselves against everyone else. They have been told they need to squash everyone else's idea in order to survive. They have been told that they need to feed into the anger and the hurt and get revenge. Otherwise, there'll be no justice. They have been told that they need to be afraid of you. They have been lied to, and someone needs to show them the truth. They are being held captive by the real enemies, the enemies of our soul, the fear, the anger, the pain, the injustice, the hurt, the pride. And Jesus entered the world to free people from that prison. The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is upon me. The Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted, to proclaim that the captives will be released, the prisoners will be freed. As surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, I will take no pleasure in the death of the wicked people. I only want them to turn from their wicked ways so they can live. And He asks us to be the ones to show them the way. I urge you, first of all, pray for all people. Ask for God to help them. Intercede on their behalf and give thanks to them. This is good and pleases God our Savior, who wants everyone to be saved and to understand the truth. We need to open our hearts to the fact that the enemy we face isn't an enemy. They are our brothers and sisters. They are trapped behind enemy lines. They're prisoners of war. They are held captive by the forces of sin and death. And God has an escape plan for them. And we are a part of that plan. And is standing orders to each one of us are get in there and get them out. We need to free them all. No man left behind. The plan is to speak life into our enemies, not death. This plan is to bless and not curse. The plan is to show them that there is a better way, a way where you don't need to fight to be king of the hill, but a way where we can rise up together. A way where that cycle of hurt and anger and pain can be broken. A way where we don't need to fear because we have an almighty God who has won the battle. A way of honor, a way of dignity, a way of respect. And we do that by showing them honor and dignity and respect. We do that by showing them love. Maybe as you're listening to this, you're realizing how trapped you have been. Maybe you're realizing that the enemies you're facing that you thought were your enemies aren't your enemies at all, but that there are deeper ones out there, the enemies of your soul, lurking, trying to destroy. And some of you out there, maybe you're still in that prison camp. You've never chosen to make Jesus your Lord and Savior. And if that's you, Jesus is the one who is here to set you free. He is the one who has the escape plan. And his plan is this, just admit your mistakes and know that you can't free yourself. Believe that he died on the cross and rose from the grave. And that through his resurrection, he has the power to free us. And choosing to follow him. Because you can see the way, you can believe it's the way, but it does you no good unless you walk that path. If that's you in the auditorium today, if you feel that you're stuck in that old life and you want freedom, you want Jesus to be your guide, and you want to find the freedom from that, and you haven't known it before, you haven't understood who he is, but now you realize that I think this is the way. I feel that this is the escape plan, and I need Jesus to guide me because I am helpless by myself. If that is you, if you're making this decision for the first time, I invite you to come up here to the altar and stand here. And I know that's a bold move, but are you going to let fear control you? Are you going to let your pride control you? Or are you going to say, Jesus, I want to follow? Is there anyone here who wants to choose to follow Jesus and say, please free me from that prison? I want to let you know that that door is always open. It doesn't close just because we end here. And so if you decide that later today or tomorrow or next week, go tell someone about it, a believer who you trust. Now, for those of us who already know Jesus, I'm imagining that the Holy Spirit might have put an enemy or two on your mind, someone who you've been holding at a distance, someone that you've been funneling anger and hate, someone that you've been afraid of, someone who you think you're so much better than. If that's you, and if you want to see that enemy with different eyes, I invite you to come up to the altar right now. If you want to let go of whatever's keeping you from showing them love, right here, right now, come to this altar. Kneel at the cross and tell him what's going on. Give him your burden and let Jesus speak his truth to you. Find the release that you are seeking for. If you see that pride in your heart and you want to be rid of it, come to the altar. If you see the anger and the fear and the pain, come to the altar. Release it at his feet and ask him to show you the paths. as we close, as we go through our final song, we're not going to have lyrics on the screen. Instead, we're going to have this. And I challenge each one of you, whether you're up here at the altar, whether you're still out there, consider these words. Reflect on them. And after you've had your time, I challenge you, are you willing to say them? And I say challenge because don't say them unless you mean it. Don't say these words to God unless you are ready for what He has to say, because He may show you something you don't want to see. And the path that He guides you down may be tougher than the one you're on right now. I'm not going to lie. But His promise is that if you are willing to trust Him with your innermost being, if you are willing to trust Him with your emotions and your thoughts and who you are, it may be rough in the short term, but in the end, it will be worth it. And He wants to shower upon you riches beyond imagination. Lord Father, I pray for each and every person in this auditorium and at home watching online. I pray that during this week you interact with us. I pray that you open our hearts and open our minds to see what you are doing. And where our selfish nature would jump to being heard, where we would take the high road because we're being prideful or facing pain. Remind us to come to you. And instead, help us to see your heart. Amen.